In June of 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte crossed into Belgium at the head of the Armée du Nord. He commanded 128,000 veteran soldiers, but waiting for him were two massive coalition armies, the Duke of Wellington's Anglo-Allied force of 106,000 and Prince Blücher's Prussian army of 128,000. Combined, they outnumbered the French nearly 2-1. Facing these odds, Napoleon's only option was to drive a physical wedge between his enemies. By striking the seam, he could split the coalition. Once isolated, the French could pin one in place while pivoting to crush the other, giving Napoleon the local advantage. For this to work, the French army had to move with flawless speed. Any delay or any failure to keep Wellington and Blücher separated meant the coalition would close the jaws of the trap and destroy the Armée du Nord. 2 hours before dawn on June 15th, French forces moved in total secrecy to strike the border. They quickly forced a passage across the Sambre River, catching the Prussian outposts entirely by surprise. It took 12 hours for reports of the crossing to reach the Duke of Wellington, 30 miles to the north in Brussels. Unsure of Napoleon's exact route, Wellington hesitated to commit his troops, spending the evening at the Duchess of Richmond's ball as the French poured into Belgium. With the element of surprise secured, Napoleon divided his command. He assigned his left wing to Marshal Michel Ney, ordering him to march straight up the Brussels road to seize the vital crossroads at Quatre. While Ney advanced north, Napoleon took the remainder of the army, pushing northeast to engage Prince Blücher's massing Prussian forces at the town of Ligny. By nightfall, Napoleon had effectively driven his wedge between the two Allied armies. But his plan now rested on a fragile premise. The two halves of his own army, miles apart, had to act in precise coordination. On the afternoon of June 16th, that coordination was tested as two massive battles erupted simultaneously. At Ligny, Napoleon ordered a frontal assault against the Prussian lines. The fighting quickly devolved into a brutal, close-quarters slugging match, with French infantry and Prussian defenders battling house to house behind barricades and through burning buildings. 7 miles to the west at Quatre, the French advance stalled. Marshal Ney had arrived late and squandered the morning, allowing Wellington precious time to rush reinforcements down from Brussels to defend the crossroads. As Ney hesitated, Wellington stabilized his line, feeding British infantry and cavalry directly into the fray to hold off the scattered French assaults. By mid-afternoon, the momentum at both Ligny and Quatre had completely halted. Napoleon and Ney were bogged down in attritional warfare, and both commanders realized they needed an immediate influx of fresh troops to break their respective deadlocks. The crisis for the French was that both halves of the army were now eagerly waiting for the exact same reserves to arrive. Those reserves belonged to General d'Erlon's First Corps. He commanded 20,000 men and 46 guns, sitting in the open vacuum between Napoleon's forces and Ney's left wing. Sensing an opportunity to annihilate the Prussians, Napoleon sent an urgent order for d'Erlon to turn his entire corps east, strike the Prussian flank at Ligny, and finish the battle. But when Marshal Ney learned his reinforcements were being diverted, he flew into a rage. Facing overwhelming pressure from Wellington, Ney sent his own desperate counterorder, demanding d'Erlon turn around and march immediately to Quatre. In previous campaigns, a competent chief of staff would have dispatched multiple riders with clear, prioritized instructions to prevent this exact scenario. But Marshal Soult's staff system was flawed, allowing both contradictory orders to reach d'Erlon without any clarification on which took precedence. The result was physical paralysis. For the most critical hours of the campaign, 20,000 fully equipped French soldiers marched back and forth across the Belgian countryside, participating in neither battle. Back at Ligny, the confusion spread. When Napoleon spotted an unidentified column approaching his flank through the smoke, he feared it was an Allied maneuver. He paused his final assault for over an hour before realizing it was d'Erlon's corps, which by then was already turning back toward Ney. At Quatre, Ney realized d'Erlon was not coming. To buy time against Wellington's growing numbers, Ney ordered Kellerman's heavy cavalry to attack. He led his men in a charge straight into the British center, filling the void left by the missing infantry. Through poor communication and conflicting egos, the French military machine had dismantled its own numerical advantage. Napoleon's strategy to trap the Allies in two separate battles had instead caught his own army in a fatal vacuum. With daylight fading and heavy rain falling at Ligny, Napoleon finally unleashed his ultimate reserve. The veteran Imperial Guard charged through the downpour, breaking the exhausted Prussian lines with bayonets fixed. The French took the field, but because D'Erlon never arrived to cut off the escape route, Prince Blücher's beaten army was able to slip away into the darkness, retreating north in an organized fashion. At Quatre, the situation remained a stalemate. Battered by Wellington's reinforced lines, Ney's forces were eventually pushed back, leaving the crossroads in Allied hands as the sun set. Despite sustaining thousands of casualties, the coalition leadership remained intact. Wellington and his staff were already coordinating their next move, ensuring their forces remained connected and in command. Napoleon had secured 2 tactical victories on paper, but because a massive corps of 20,000 men fired no shots that day, he failed to destroy either enemy army, leaving both free to fight again. On the morning of June 17th, the French did not immediately pursue their retreating enemies. Instead, Napoleon spent the early hours on the battlefield at Ligny, reviewing his regiments and distributing awards for bravery, while the Allies utilized the quiet to organize their withdrawal. When the French finally began their chase at noon, torrential summer storms broke out. The roads turned to deep mud, bogging down artillery and slowing the advance to a crawl as the Allies safely repositioned. Blücher's Prussians marched north to Wavre, staying within supporting distance of the British. Meanwhile, Wellington halted his retreat and deployed his men along a small, defensible ridge near a village called Waterloo. The communication breakdown of June 16th did more than just cost Napoleon a battle. It provided the Allies the single day they needed to reset the trap, ensuring that at Waterloo, the French would face the unified weight of both coalition armies.